This Todd-versation is brought to you in part by Splendid by Porvenir, with promotional consideration from Volcano Produce.
Hey, hi-ho, everybody. How the hell are you today? I know you're doing well. I hope you're doing well. That is my wish for everybody on this planet, to just get along, for God's sakes. It can't be that hard. It just can't. Anyways, let's move past my soapbox moment for a minute. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm excited about the guests we have today. We are honored to have some cool folks here talking about a very cool company doing some cool things that I think you all should pay attention to, because I think this is a cool way to look at how we go down the road in the future, about the way we should be doing business, conducting ourselves in a bigger global environment to make things better in this world, because we all work together, like I said, getting along. Anyways, everybody from the Organically Grown Company, which was not that name long ago, I can remember way back then, please welcome the CEO, Brenna Davis, and my personal produce shaman, yes, my produce shaman in the house, Pioneer Emeritus. And I told them earlier, Pioneer Emeritus, because they can't call him Pioneer Chicken, because they've already taken that name. Ladies and gentlemen, my friend, David Lively. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Welcome.
Oh, thanks for having us.
That big of an introduction, David, and you just say, welcome, for Christ's sake. Come on, get some fire into your ass. I got you here for 45 minutes. We got shit to talk about.
It's amazing to see you bringing your circus career onto the screen. So, yeah.
Thank you. Well, you know what? Thank you. Well, the porno career didn't work out, so we got to try a different avenue. That's why I'm doing this, Dave. That's the only reason.
I'm going to give you the hat and the whip. You're going to have to pay for the boots.
Done. Who says I don't have one already in the closet? I am thrilled that you guys are here hanging out with us today. I really am. I'm excited for this conversation. There's a lot to talk about that you guys got going on. And Brenda's in her new role as CEO. We'll talk about her, what she's up to these days. Dave, you've got such perspective on the world. I can't wait to touch on that, but talk about this industry. I got a myriad of questions I could do for all my guests, and try to come up and find some new stuff out and turn some rocks over and see if we don't get people inspired a little bit to look differently at the world. But before we do that, like I do with all of my guests, because I don't like reading resumes and bios and stuff like that, because a lot of times they have big words in them, and I went to public high school and I can't read the big words, so I'll let you guys do it for me. Please, if you wouldn't mind, Brenna, we'll open up with you. Please tell everybody a little bit about who you are and a brief little intro, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. Yeah. I'm Brenna Davis. I am an environmental scientist by training, and have done environmental sustainability with businesses, gosh, for the last 25 years or so. I before this job at OGC, I was on the executive team at PCC Community Markets, and I have a huge passion for food. My dad grew up on a farm, and my mom is a hippie organic farmer, so it's just in my blood. I'm super happy to be here, and to be here with you, Todd and David. So thanks for inviting us.
Oh, it's totally an honor. All right, my brother from another mother, lay it on me. Come on, tell everybody who the hell you are.
Let's see. Well, I was born in Roswell, New Mexico. I was raised primarily in Glendale, Arizona, when Glendale was the second largest produce shipping point in the United States. Spent all our time walking through green onion and turnips fields. Dropped out of social work school in the very early 80s to move to a commune in Veneta, Oregon, where I went from a small-scale gardener to a large-scale gardener to a small-scale farmer, and eventually to the vice president of sales and marketing with Organically Grown Company.
I love it.
And then, lo and behold, I found myself getting old. And as I closed on 70, a wise friend who I met at a high school reunion had retired in his 50s. What was that about? It was about the professors he worked with telling him to get out and enjoy life before he was 70 years old. So I started heading into semi-retirement, took on the role of Pioneer Emeritus, and here I sit, wise and on the sideline most of the time. Except
I love
when
it.
I won in the game.
Well earned, well deserved, sir. Well deserved. All right, let's get rocking. Brent, I'm going to open up with you. Would you tell everybody a little bit what OGC is?
Sure. OGC is the country's one of the country's top wholesale produce distribution organizations dedicated to organic. And in 2022, we distributed 125 million pounds of organic produce to grocers, restaurants, and also manufacturers in 6 states, kind of up and down the West Coast. It's kind of a trip to hear the volume we've done, David, I'm sure, when thinking about where we started. We buy produce from more than 345 organic vendors, and they represent about 1,000 farms worldwide. So really, we're able to pick what's best, and we bring it in for our customers. About 99% of our inventory is in our possession for less than 6 days. So it's turn and burn. And so we work 365 days a year to get that produce out. Also, we're registered as an Oregon Benefit Corporation, and we operate from 4 facilities in the Pacific Northwest, about 250 folks that we have our coworkers. And our mission is to promote and inspire the growth of the organic movement. It's pretty incredible what we've done from the early days when you hear about our origins that David will talk about in a second. But we are the first company in the United States to be owned by a perpetual purpose trust, which enables us to serve the purpose of that trust rather than just adding value or making people rich for holding our stock. So it's pretty exciting stuff. And I every day I walk through the doors, I'm excited to be here and be here with my coworkers.
I love it. Well, yeah, I'm going to get into the weeds a little bit about the trust thing, but I'm going to get us down that trail first. So DL, let's go, let's back this whole thing up and throw this question at you, right? Yeah. Well, I don't want to say back at all. I got to be careful. I don't want to, I'm trying to be kind here and not go like age jokes. I'm keeping them off the table. But, you made mention of it. I got to bring it up. You started at commune. Here's where it goes. OGC is basically born out of all of you and where you wanted the world to go, what you saw the world doing, your need to, in my opinion, make a mark, right? I think that was what that path was that you're on, is like, what mark are we going to make as a society and together that's going to make a change? And I think that's incredibly powerful when I look at it from that perspective. So first question I would throw at you is, what was OGC?
What was OGC? Well, OGC was initially a community organization. It was put together by non-professional agriculturalists. Some of them were gardening at a large scale, maybe selling some stuff. A lot of them were just environmental activists, social change agents, etc. We've still got all the minutes back to the first meeting. I read that first meeting. It was in September of 77, written on paper, moth holes in it, but it's there. And its first meeting, they pretty much knew what agenda was going to run us forever. They already could see the value in growers coordinating. They could see the value in creating a marketing system, but they didn't do that. They pretty much just set up a nonprofit and they used it as a community sharing point where people could get together. They were coordinating some fertilizer purchases. They were talking about varieties. They were talking about how to keep deer out of your patches with fencing, and theoretically tiger shit from the circus would do that, according to some people. And they're all grown pot. And that was the arrangement for 2 or 3 years. I came on board in 1980, spring of 1980. The first meeting I went to, there were all 5 people there. But we had a real problem, which was we had way too many people growing product for too small a market. And we ended up really deciding to take this thing commercial, where it could coordinate what we were doing in the Northwest and it could ship stuff out of the Northwest. And at that point, we became an ag marketing co-op, and it went from being a nonprofit community organization to being a grower-owned ag marketing co-op. Same as Blue Diamond, Ocean Spray, Sunkist. Same rules. Right. Eventually, we realized that the employees had all the skills that were necessary to run it. The growers didn't, because we were a full-scale distributor. We became a full-scale distributor because, being in the Northwest, we could only produce for about 6 months of the year. We were like, we're not full scale. How do we pay the rent? How do we pay our staff? How do we keep in touch with accounts? We became a full-scale distributor, and we brought employees in eventually. Had to go through being a C corporation to become an S corporation, which allowed us to create a hybrid that was owned by growers and staff. And then eventually we created an ESOP, an employee stock ownership plan, within that S Corp. And so those were all the manifestations we went through in terms of cocooning and chrysalis and those kind of things, get where we're at. We were very small scale. It was very bootstraps operation, no loans, all capital created within the business. Very dedicated to the alternative community, but we were always reaching toward the mainstream. We were always driven by the fact that our growers wanted to grow more, and that meant we had to sell more, and that meant we had to have a larger account base. So that was kind of the push. As Brenna mentioned, first year we did 100,000. We could potentially do 100,000 in an hour now. So the growth
will change.
20-30% growth for close to 40 years.
Really incredible.
Thanks for joining the Todd-versation. And now, a word from our sponsor. Splendid by Porvenir has long been recognized in the fruit and vegetable industry for its quality, volume, availability, and timely distribution. Did we mention that we have the best mangoes on the planet? Our decades of experience in providing a wide range of superior products throughout the year gives our customers and retailers alike confidence in Splendid products to deliver excellence 100% of the time. When only the best should be on your table, trust Splendid's commitment to exceeding your expectations. We are the best because we do it right.
It's an amazing transformation to certainly to watch and to be a part of. But talk a little bit about that, rocket ride of acceptance that the industry traveled, right? Because it happened so fast in a lot of ways. I'll get into some more questions, but I'll give you that one to start with. I mean,
yeah. Well, I would say that the first thing that happened in terms of growth was just filling the demand. That in itself was huge. There was no wiring back then, as you well recall. People in cities didn't even know who was in the next city, hardly. There was no infrastructure whatsoever. And so that had to all be created over time. And the middle was the most developed of all of it. The co-ops were up and going at that point. And natural food stores, we benefited greatly by the fact that we were in a very hot organic market in Eugene and in the Northwest. We had probably at least a half dozen independent retailers in Eugene and a lot of co-ops around us. So we had an immediate account base to sell to, and we could sell them our stuff. And then the goal was to go out and find all the other stuff. And there were holes all over. There were holes in citrus. We didn't have apples half of the year. We were actually having to move conventional ones. So first thing was just fill the holes and fill that growth that was already just sitting there like a vacuum waiting to suck whatever you put through it. Then we had to actually start getting out there and trying to start developing accounts. And as I say, the middle was in place, the co-ops, the natural food stores, the juice bars. There was no small end. There were no farmers markets. There were no CSAs. There were very few farm stands. And at the big end, the chains were goofing around with it. Alberts and Safeway and these guys were coming and going, but they really weren't dedicated to it. They responded to the Alar scare, of course, but then they drifted away from it. They decided to work with NutriClean. They drifted away from it. And so they were kind of the flirts at the high end, but not a whole lot was going on with them.
No, right, 100%.
Yeah, and so that was where we stood for quite a while. Then one of the big changes that happened was we went from what I called a food stamp marketplace to a soccer mom marketplace. And basically a bunch of young hippies grew up and got good jobs and had money, and they still were operating with the convictions that had got them into this in the first place in terms of protest movements, developing an alternative community, which turned toward natural foods as its food line, which created a demand for organic. And now those people weren't shopping in the little natural food stores. They were shopping in fairly refined stores. This is when Wild Oats is coming on, Whole Foods is coming on, New Seasons gets created, those kind of things. And so we have that marketplace, and that's when the chains really started getting interested and started coming around.
And I think I was in the food. My mom used to, as a kid in the 70s, we'd put our bell bottoms on, and my mom and I would go to the little PCC community markets food co-op. I remember it was just barrels of bulk foods and all kinds of carob and things that you couldn't get in the normal food store. And there were this, organic food there that my grandparents had always grown that way. And my great grandparents in West Seattle always had an orchard. And man, it was just a different scene. It was not sophisticated, and it was really rootsy. So hearing David describe how it went, to the sophisticated kind of Irwans of the world and the kind of, upscale situation is, I experienced that just in my lifetime, seeing that.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you, just based on what David was saying. It's like, as a CEO now, you hear about this industry's history, especially your history, because the history of OGC is incredibly rich, right? It's a pillar of what is out there today, right? If you just took your 10 models or whatever the number might be, the OGC's got to be there when you want to learn something. And you talk about a great case study, a marketing study, or something to learn about how to go about creating business and doing it in this environment. I don't think there's a better case study that's out there, but it's got to make you shake your head a little bit. It's got to explain things a little bit. I mean, how do you feel about it today when you hear all that?
Oh, the history.
Yeah.
Gosh, I respect it so much. Just the conviction and the vision that those folks had to make this happen. And then, how they just kept at it year after year, growing and improving. And I take it really seriously. Like you can't see it right now, but I have a picture of a group of the founders on my wall. And I think I want them looking at me every single day so that I really am focusing on that mission and making it happen. But I think it's just incredible what David and a lot of those original folks, David Ambrose, Tom Lively, all of them, all the work they did. I'll also say that their retirement represents a pretty significant shift in the organic world. And I think we're seeing this generational shift from kind of boomers to Gen Xers. And gosh, I hope we get it right. It's a lot of pressure. So I'm really grateful to have David around and some of the original folks that we can all talk to and still mentor us as we continue their vision of what they had for the organic space.
Yeah, you're right. This next generation is interesting to watch because business isn't the same, right? Business is much more transactional. Business is much more about, get cheap is just a terrible mantra to run a food company around. And I think it's something that we face all sectors of the food world. I think we don't value our food very much in this country. I think we certainly don't raise the bar on ourselves when it comes to our food in a lot of ways. We're certainly willing to accept things for what they are versus what they should be, which I find a little scary sometimes and probably not in our best, long-term best long-term effects for the planet, that's for sure. So I look back in a lot of ways and I want to kind of come alongside where we're heading. I believe in our excitement as we built this thing, right? Because to your point, David, you were just trying to find somebody to put something up on the shelf, right? It didn't matter what you had to sell them. It just mattered that they would say yes to buy something in a lot of ways. A lot of ways the industry grew too fast. I think sometimes we lost our way, sometimes with common sense. I certainly feel that way and take something that really bothers me is the way we handle packaging in the organic produce space, that we weren't like-minded and told that, no, you go make the other guys package it. Where are the alternative to what they're doing? Why should we go down this poly trail and create all this stuff? It just, you end up buying good organic produce, you wrap it up in plastic and go, well, it kind of cancels each other out like a friend trying to diet Coke, right? No calories. And I think it became, unfortunately for me, that's something that really bothers. Think of, from your perspective, Dave, when you think about do-overs, things that you look back on now and go, God, I wish we'd have done that differently. Is there anything that comes to mind?
No, I thought a lot about this one, Todd. I really did, because I figured there must be a bunch of stuff. And I really decided there's not very much I would redo. I think that almost everything that took place, I won't say it needed to take place, but that was where gravity took us, I guess, or where need took us. And you have to remember, like I said, there was no wiring in place. This is not an established industry that attempts to turn itself in another direction. This is something creating itself from base, zero. And not only that, we were looking for a fight because we were literally saying we are an alternative to a failed model, which was, we were met with hostility, and we were met with a lot of hostility. I was personally met with a lot of hostility. When I was operating in the alternative community or the organic community with Eugene, we were seen as warrior heroes, as organic farmers. But I was the one who was going out and meeting extension agents, groups of growers, 40 retailers from a chain, things like that. And I was typically viewed as either a clown or a jerk or an enemy, one or the other, but it was with suspicion for sure. So it wasn't like we were going to get a lot of help on this journey from anybody. We were basically on our own in terms of what we were going to do. And so the amount of blundering and stumbling that we were going to, encounter was just going to take place. And I don't think that we could change a lot. I mean, the biggest thing that everyone still, half of us regret is the fact that we hooked up with the federal government and decided to work within the system, which was a system that a lot of us just a few years earlier wanted to overthrow and had no interest in. And all of a sudden now we're going to the feds and going, help us get set up here. And that worked in a lot of ways, and it didn't in a lot of ways. And I think we all understand that. But I don't think that if we said, let's go back and take that decision back, that we would be on that much of a better track at this point in time. I actually think we've gone through a lot of the roughest spots potentially, too. I think what's just happened with the enforcement of standards, and some other things, these are big wins that are really a message to how this is going to take place. There's still going to be pressure on organic. It's not going to go away. But I do think we're at a point in Oregon. We are now, through the Oregon Organic Coalition, we're working very closely with OSU and with the Department of Ag and with our legislatures on passing bills and budgets that are really critical to organic. And I'm glad to see us get to that point. I was thinking when I was getting ready for this question, though, I thought we're kind of like a Pinocchio. We're a wooden boy that sought to become a real boy, and we're walking around trying to find out who's going to help us do that. And the conventional system said, you're a wooden boy. That's what you are. We really are not going to help you become a real boy. So if we're going to do it, we're going to do it our way, I guess. But I'm very concerned with the fact that the trade is cleaving, as I see it, and really moving in two directions simultaneously.
Expand upon that for a second.
Well, we saw it in terms of, my biggest concern probably is with the retailers and with the large retail chains. I think they're the biggest disruptors in this whole thing. They have moved away from local and regional ag toward national levels. In their, they're basically in their own war with other conventional retailers. And I learned years ago, these guys kind of move around like this. They can't move very far from each other in terms of their plans and how they use ads, promotions, everything they've got. They're very on the same theme. And that theme is synergy, quote unquote. And the way I encountered their sense of synergy was inefficiency. When I saw them moving, when they were closing regional offices, when they were consolidating, when they were taking buyer expertise out of their system and putting people on the phone. This is an actual true story. Guy from one of the chains calls my brother. He's doing replenishment. He wants to know what an FIG is. This is a buyer for a large conventional chain that is not sure what an FIG is. And so I think the directions they've gone, and especially as you put out, the cheapness of it is really, really a big problem. The message that organic is going to be able to sell food cheap is a disaster because it goes completely in the face of what we know. I had a Fred Meyer executive tell me there's three things: quality, availability, price. You get two. So if we're going to take price, what are we going to give up? Are we going to give up availability, or are we going to give up quality in that mix? And there's a lot of growers asking that question. There's growers who know it takes $16 to produce a box of broccoli, and they know the market's not going to support that with the way the chains are taking the program.
Well, it goes back to what I said earlier. It's about understanding the true value of food. We don't do a really good job of that in this country. But FIG, fuck, I'm good. Is that what that stands for? No, am I wrong? Brenna, I want to throw something to you because your career has, I think this is kind of is a good spot to throw. Your career has been about really is incredibly impressive. I mean, your work's about trying to help companies and people become accountable to do better. I mean, it's kind of the way I kind of put it all together in my mind of what I was reading and learning a little bit. So talk to me a little bit from your perspective, compare how that thought process has changed over the years, right? Because we're in a different world now, right? We have this check, we're in a, like I call the checkbox world now, right? We have to make sure that we're checking boxes more than we're doing stuff. So if you wouldn't mind, touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. Well, I started my career at a time when we really didn't have a thing called business sustainability. Right. I had to hack my degree and kind of figure it all out and do an internship in the energy sector to try to even get some experience. And I started really thinking about it in 1990 when I met Al Gore. My mom was working on this project, Geosphere project, that was taking an image of the Earth without clouds. And these artists were, check this out, were taking little bits of pictures and gluing it together for this big globe for Rio 90. They didn't have computers that could do that in 1990. Just blows your mind. Anyway, I really got into it and started working on it. And I worked in 5-6 different industries trying to reduce the environmental impact. But When we started, no one was talking about it. They thought you were a freak for working on it. The environmental people were mostly going to school to count frogs and trees. And the fact that I wanted to work on to help business, they made me some type of pariah, I guess you would say, not popular. Then you'd go into the room and people would hear, oh, you're working on environmental issues. And they'd say, gosh, we don't like you either. So really, there are a few of us in the Northwest that were kind of pioneering or, early adopters of trying to create this movement. And ultimately now, like the SEC has rules on it, like you're saying, checking the boxes. And even conventional ag is trying to claim all of these sustainability things that they're doing. And so it's been an interesting ride, I'll tell you that, Todd. And when you're working like when I worked at a natural foods company at PCC, there's such a high standard for sustainability there. And yet, the Krogers of the world or the, big box chains of the world are kind of really pushing the envelope on sustainability. So I think some of the smaller companies have, not necessarily PCC, but, they're doing such great work, but some of the smaller companies just hard to keep up in the world. So I think, what OGC is really interesting is that OGC started working on this stuff in the 70s. I mean, they were thinking about, their environmental footprint. They have been thinking about packaging for a really long time and have 100% renewable energy and have really working on decarbonizing the fleet here. And, these are things that just were kind of in our DNA early on. And I think, looking at bringing it back to packaging and organic, that's the number one thing that folks who buy products and produce in a grocery store, it's their number one concern is plastic. That's what the research says. And so it's something we have been thinking about and really working on from our private label potato line that we have that has very little plastic to just doing special things for retailers that don't want any plastic on their shelves. So that was a journey, Todd, but it wasn't, people weren't talking about it 30 years ago now I'm aging myself, but I'm about to turn 50, but people weren't talking about it when I started. And now we are. Yeah. Really exciting.
Well, it's got to be interesting for that perspective, because you're right. People weren't talking about it. And now it's become, I think, two conversations in some ways. The folks that are into it because they are, and the folks that are into it because they have to be. And it's hard, I think, to sometimes find that line of, I always say people are in the organic deal. There's people who have been in for 15 years and people for 15 minutes. And there's a big difference between the two, right? But something I have to touch on that you did bring up, and I think this is really something that I think that the trade needs to recognize. Attributes matter to consumers. And the more attributes that talk on the opposite side of what organic is, the less the word organic is going to get heard. And attributes are a dangerous thing, I think, when it comes to, because attributes don't have any kind of bar raised on them. You can come up and say anything you want, right?
Yeah.
Regenerative is an attribute that doesn't apply to organic. It applies to anything, right? It's a principle, not a practice. There's a lot to it, right? Sustainable. What does it actually mean? All natural. And we've gone through that experience. It's all natural. Oh, great. It's all natural. They say it's good for me. So attributes matter. And I think it's really important that we think about that a little bit when we talk about moving the trade forward in a lot of aspects. To Dave's point about, we've kind of lost our way in some mindset. So I'm going to say that because I want to throw this next question out to the both of you. It's like, okay, so talk to me a little bit about what organic's doing right today with consumers.
Yeah. Can I pick up what you were laying down real fast?
Go. Shit, I don't care. Go, girl. Say whatever the hell you want. Hey, if you're talking, Dave, it's not. So go, girl. You just let it rip.
Oh, I love listening to him. We have great conversations, actually. But at Expo
we do too. You should be at all of them. And there's our conversations are daylight and then dark conversations. There's a difference between a conversation with Dave in the daylight and a difference in a conversation with Dave when the sun goes down. Did you know that? I
have a feeling.
No, you don't have a lot of feelings when the sun goes down. Trust me.
That's when the red wine comes out, right?
Yeah, it's the problem.
Yeah, that's right. So I just got back from Expo West talking about attributes. And, attributes were my world at PCC when I worked there. They did such incredible work to try to keep up with the attributes and try to put 95% organic on their shelves and do so much great work around attributes. And I was in the room and they're saying the research says it matters even more about, attributes matter even more. But what was interesting thing to note was, there was folks that were growing conventional products like pea protein or garbanzo beans in particular, chickpeas, that we're talking about, oh, well, these chickpeas are regenerative. And my question was, hey, you can be regenerative, but you can still spray glyphosate on your garbanzo beans to desiccate them before you turn them into, whatever you're turning them into.
Correct.
What's the glyphosate level in that package of stuff that people are eating? So it's kind of scary in a way. And I think organic needs to deal with this whole issue on regenerative. And if the organic seal had kept up with consumer expectations, research is telling us, then we wouldn't be in this situation. So it's a little frustrating, and I'm not sure consumers understand it.
No, I think we're making them more confused as it goes. And you're right. I mean, the USDA is not a marketing company, so therefore every company marketed their own way as opposed to a unified front, which probably would have made things maybe a little better for consumers if we would have leaned into Harvard. Davey, same question over to you. What's organic doing right today with consumers? And you don't like the word consumer, so let's get that on the table.
No, he does
Let's get
not
that
like
on the
that.
table. Yeah. So I do hate the word consumers, at least as it applies to organic. And as I told you, I wrote a piece for the Organic Report titled "Organic Consumer as an Oxymoron," because I don't think. Well, I ran into a guy at one of the Produce Network events, and as he put it, if you start thinking in terms of, if you come into the conversation at the word consumer, you have divorced yourself from all of the responsibility up to that point, pretty much. Your job is basically to go into a store, pick a product that meets the price point you're looking for, and head out. You really have very little responsibility to anything upstream from that. And in fact, the conventional food system really doesn't want you to even be aware of what's happening upstream. Look at the fight about labeling of GMO, look at the fight about documentation of TAFOs. The less known about the conventional food trade and its implications, the better. And so I prefer the word shopper by a long shot. And I think even within shopper, I think it's an evolution. And maybe the evolution starts with consumer and goes from there. But the thing that I really want to see us do is treat the shopper in a different way, and especially in the part of the trade that we still really have a lot of participation in, because definitely as the conventional system moves into organic, it is pushing the what I'll call the legacy or traditional organic trade to the side. And really, we're not necessary to the process of it. And what we're left with is probably 30% of the market that are the people who really are deeply concerned on this front. They typically are the ones who keep the co-ops alive. And by the way, the co-ops are doing incredible work at this point. In the Northwest, I think we've got over 24 co-ops with over 30 stores. None of these have ever gone out of business. This is the core of the organic trade. And this is where I think we do our work with the consumer best. And what I want to see us do is take on terms that already exist. What I look toward is Wendell Berry's term eater, and I look towards Slow Food's term co-producer. And I think that the best thing we can do is put the shopper on a journey that takes them, as they learn about food and food production, to being an eater who sees it as a political act, who sees that beyond their own well-being and that of their family, that it's work being done on behalf of the planet and all the creatures that live here. And I think ultimately getting to the point where they do see themselves as co-producers who have responsibility to the development of the types of foods they eat and have opportunities to influence that in terms of varieties, in terms of the aspects of the food they want, giving feedback to seed producers and stuff like that. But the more engaged we can get that shopper, the individual, and treat them as a living, viable human capable of helping change take place, rather than as someone whose position in life is to go in and buy shit and take it home and eat it and throw the plastic away, the better.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I've been in some conversation. Well, come on, I'm on. Don't interrupt. Hey, you can't interrupt when I start talking. I'll fuck up and I won't remember.
You're going to disagree with exactly.
No. Yeah, see, like I get my chops busted, and I love it. Well, I've been getting into conversations with a few folks over Environmental Working Group's Dirty Dozen list that just came out not too long ago, and listening to people talk about it and how they don't like it and how, blah, 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 blah. And, we're trying to scare people away from eating fruits and vegetables. And I understand their perspective, and a lot of it's dietitians. And I get where they're coming from, and I love dietitians. I'm a huge supporter of them. I think dietitians in the retail store are freaking geniuses that are underused by the consumers and by the retailers themselves. But that's another subject for another time. But, I've been listening to some of what they have to say, and I keep coming back around, David, to come alongside your point a little bit, is that I have a hard time when folks are sending me these graphs about, you've got to eat so many strawberries to get a pesticide load, blah, 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 because you're just rationalizing pesticides. You're actually making an argument that pesticides are okay by using a graph that says I can eat this many without getting hurt. And I ask them back, it's like, buddy, 100% sure, 100% positive that the long-term effects in your life on pesticides are all okay. And nobody wants to take that conversation any farther than that question. So I get where you're coming from. So with that being said, in my soapbox moment, happy for you to fire something back, either one of you, but I want to throw this question out to you. And Brent, I'm going to lean into you first to go back to this. What are we doing wrong with consumers? And then from your perspective as well, what can we be doing better with consumers? So take whatever I said, run with it. Take those two questions, run with it. I don't know, wherever you want to go.
I mean, to your point that you've been making throughout our conversation, Todd, people don't understand the total cost of food. They don't understand that this cheap food that they're buying is subsidized, and that we're subsidizing petrochemicals, we're subsidizing chemicals, we're subsidizing harm to farm workers that have to use those chemicals and their unborn children. There's just a long list. And so when I think about that dirty dozen, it's like, well, yeah, maybe there's a de minimis ingestion, depending on what you're eating. But man, the long-term impact of that cumulative over time is significant. What about the impact to the pollinators? What about the impact to aquatic health? What about the impact to human health? What about the impact of frontline people that live next to those chemical companies and that are, potentially, breathing, all kinds of stuff. So I just think it's not as simple as what folks think. So, what do you do to educate consumers? You need to be connecting with them. We need to be telling these stories about why organic is better. We need to really be investing in telling these stories about organic now, especially because of this pressure from regenerative. And although I understand that it's good that conventional ag is adopting some regenerative practices, because overall it's a net improvement. You'll also note that at Expo West, the award that used to be, there's an award now that groups regenerative and organic together, like best regenerative and organic product. That's not right. So I just think, for consumers, just sharing our stories, sharing the data, continuing research like the Organic Center does to understand things like that, organic sequesters 26% more carbon than conventional, all of these added benefits. And the Organic Trade Association has a great new wheel to help retailers communicate the benefits of organic that they're rolling out, that I think will be really helpful to anyone. So if you're interested, go onto the OTA website and check it out.
Well, you're right. I will say this: cheap has a hidden cost, and if we don't recognize that, we are going to be in more trouble than we are. David, back to you. I mean, what's organic doing wrong, and what can we do better, do you think?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with both of you on it. I think that the quest for cheap is what is wrong. It is an incredible disservice all up and down. It's profound within our entire society that we have created a cheap food system that is based on suppressing information about the impacts of all the costs that are not on the table, to where you can go in and think that you're really getting something this cheap when the actual cost, if added up, could be 3 or 4 times that much. And that cheap food policy keeps us from a legitimate debate with the conventional system about their system versus ours in terms of cost inputs and rewards off the other end, because we're continually seen as expensive, and we are expensive versus that. I mean, I think pretty much everyone watching this understands the dynamics of this system and how it functions, but it leaves us in a bitch of a spot in that in order to meet cheap, like I was saying earlier, the executive talked to me about, to meet cheap, you're going to have to give away quality, or you're going to have to give away quality or availability. And so what they're basically saying to us is we need organic to go cheap. And we're going, well, the problem with that is we can't compromise on either of the other fronts. We cannot compromise on the quality of the product, and we cannot compromise on-farm economic viability, which is a problem the conventional systems got in spades. And so where do we go from there? We somehow, have to get to a point where that's a true legitimate debate, where it's a level playing field and everyone's accountable for every cost and every outcome they bring to the table. Or we're going to have to get the consumers themselves to just go, we can choke it up and we'll pay for this deal, which is what they've done today.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I agree with that. Well, let's flip the switch. I mean, let's take this conversation one step further and get to the uncomfortable part of it. Let's talk a little bit about retail. What's retail doing right, wrong, and what can retail be doing better for this category? Because a lot of times, you're not actually selling the consumer, you're actually selling the retailer, and the retailers make a decision whether or not the price that you need to survive is going to work for them based on based upon whatever their math is, which is dangerous, right? Because they don't understand it in a lot of ways. They try hard, but in some ways they try hard to understand your business so they can figure out how to help you get more efficient to make their business better, right? So it's a weird path in which we walk a lot of times. So both of you, same type of deal. Talk to me about, what's retailer doing right, wrong, or, can do better in your opinion. Go fight for it. Whoever wants to go first.
I'll go ahead. Sure. Well, we know that abundant produce displays at the front of a store bring folks in, and that it drives sales across the store. And so, we've always helped folks figure out, how do you have a really abundant display, at the entrance of your store. The other piece is around, telling the story of the produce that you have on your shelves, and really arming your produce department with those stories that they can tell consumers. A lot of consumers are looking for an experience. So sampling has always been really important to drive sales. And so really having that sampling. But I will say, just like any sales, product knowledge is such an important and key part of that. And we do a lot to train our, our customers and our folks on, produce and the product knowledge around that. I will say in retail, I've noticed lately going into stores, and I visit regularly, just looking at, what folks are doing, that, there's some companies now that are really having a less abundant produce display. I mean, the produce is looking thin. There's just there'll be like 2 lines of apples sitting there, and they're a little bit not looking very fresh. So it's kind of a little bit of a disturbing trend, I think. And hopefully we'll see that reverse. David, what would you add? David has more knowledge about this in his pinky than I ever will. Probably me.
All right,
my entire
David,
life.
whip out your pinky. Let's hear your knowledge.
What do we want to talk about here? What retailers can do?
Kind of taking the whole question we started with, talking about what the consumers are about, but I'll flip it back over to the retailer. Like, what are retailers doing right or wrong, and what can retailers do to be better, to move the ball?
Well, definitely broader engagement with their customer base, for sure. In terms of, do you actually have people in the produce department all day? Do those people actually know what they're selling? Have they eaten it? Do they know the difference in different varieties within a category? Most of that stuff's been really dummied down. Most stores you go into, you're not going to be able to get that help. I did a tasting once, a jicama tasting on Cinco de Mayo. And I not only had the jicama cut up with lime and chili powder on it and stuff, but I had one whole. And this woman told me, she goes, I've been looking at those things for about 10 or 15 years in the produce department and had no clue what they were. And I'm like, wow. And I think that's another thing. Cut product. There should be cut product in a produce department all the time for people to eat, for people to try. People should be encouraged to check things out, like, eat a grape. It's not going to blow the purchase of that whole bunch. I think the more that people can interact with it, the more joy there is in the produce department, the more information there is, the more just aesthetic value in terms of the look and feel of the product and the ability to taste it. We used to have a retailer, Kathy, that worked with us up in Portland. She used to take produce when it was really at its peak and put it in front of a fan, so that the aroma just blew all through the department.
Oh yeah,
it's like
the Starbucks smell,
Right, it's like walking in, yeah.
Like Whole Foods, how Whole Foods used to waft all the bakery smells.
Yeah,
Yeah,
100%.
I think that's critical. I think the other thing is, in terms of this price deal, when I was running, supervising our marketing efforts, I used to divide our accounts into what I called the strategist and the tactician. And the strategists were those merchandisers who really saw this thing in a very large arc fashion. And they really didn't have heart attacks over, I got beat by a nickel or those kind of battles. They were really looking at it in the long term. And we know who some of those people are. Paul Inderley at Fred Meyer was one of them. Joe Hardiman at PCC was one of them. Barry Haynes at Ashland is one of them. Jeff Fairchild at New Seasons was one of them. These people play a different game. And then there's the tacticians who basically have 3 or 4 players bent over a price sheet trying to figure out a way to get a nickel cheaper. And you can actually lose business with some of these guys. You can be selling them 50 boxes of Red Delicious one week, and the next week lose that over a nickel, and you as a distributor are sitting on all that product. And those 6-day turns that Brenna talks about are no longer 6-day turns. And so we used to talk about what we called the 4 wins, and you were in some of those workshops we did. For it really to work, it's got to work for the grower, the distributor, the retailer, and the shopper. And if you're in the middle of that chain and you're gloating over the fact that someone else had to bend in order for it to work for you, you have disrupted the supply chain. And that is in itself an incredibly inefficient thing to do. And you've got to, I think the retailer can definitely spend more time going, how do I look upstream and make sure this works for the distributor and the grower, because primarily their focus is just on whether it's working for them and the consumer. And every one of the players in that chain has got to look up and down and go, is this thing working for the other players in a way that keeps this thing moving through, where fresh food's out there, it's not being wasted, being thrown away, and no one's walking away from this thing going, man, did I take it in the shorts on that.
Yeah. Hey, Todd, I thought of one other thing.
Go.
One of the things that retailers are facing is that the produce department isn't the same as it used to be, because people in this generation are not staying in their roles as long as folks did in previous generations. So you would train them up, back in the day, you would train someone on being a produce person. Man, they would develop so much product knowledge over a decade or decades. They would know all the growers, they would know what eats well, they would know, be able to help you with your recipe or whatever, you were like, use this variety and not that.
Right.
And now what we're hearing from retailers is they're just having such a high level of turnover that it's hard to keep that product knowledge in place. So I think another tip is just like making sure that there is ongoing training, because it's not like it used to be. You're going to have people rotating through your produce department.
Yeah, well, the produce department's the only place in the store where you can touch and feel and smell your food. You're not going to go walk in and ask them, can I hold that ribeye? I don't think they're going to do that for you, right? They're not.
I guess.
So, right, but you do get that opportunity. So, I agree with what you're all saying, because produce, especially organic produce, it's a morals and values decision, right? You get to vote with your dollar. You get to decide if you want to make a difference. You get to decide what tastes good. All these different things matter, and one of the things I think is interesting, and I'm going to throw this perspective to you guys, this one I want to talk about next, is sometimes I think the industry is a little bit capitalistically compromised in certain ways, right? We've done some things over time that have just been about money over other things. So would you agree with that statement? Both of you, let's throw it out to both of you. Do you agree with that statement? And if so, what are your thoughts on it? What are some solutions to it?
I would defer to David on that, because, I've been in my role for a year. And I don't have, a decades long expertise to kind of comment on, but David, what would you say to that?
Yeah, well, I think it's very difficult. Well, let's put it this way, it's very challenging in the produce trade, because we are one of the last elements of the entire economy that is pure supply and demand.
Correct.
Production means absolutely nothing for the most part. And I even divide us into 2 parts. I had in my brain, I look at the organic trade versus the organic industry. And to me, an industry is something that uses recipes to produce goods, whether that's steel or whether it's an earthbound salad. There's a recipe to it There's a predictability to it. You've got control over your costs. Your price point pretty much stays the same and things become commodities. Versus trade, to me, is where you're trading truly naturally occurring goods.
Right.
And things that are in their natural state. And that's where the supply and demand really comes in is carrots, you're going to probably have them all the time. They're going to be pretty much the same in cost. Broccoli, my God, $6 this week, $50 the next week. And so in that kind of a world, where do you get control? Because when there's too much product, people are going to sell it cheap and even below cost. It'll be like, I covered the cost of the box plus 50 cents or poured labor or something. How do you take that rodeo ride and get control over it and make it more predictable? And I don't know how well it would work, but I think one thing we definitely should be doing is we should be coming to an understanding of what the costs of production really are.
Yeah.
So when Dick at Lakeside can tell me, we had a conversation with Last Organicology, and he said, I'm in a war with a bunch of conventional growers who come into organic and are now producing my product line and attacking me in the marketplace. I know this is what it costs me to produce a box of organic broccoli after all the years I've been doing it. They have no clue what it costs them to produce a box of organic broccoli. Yeah. So they're just rocking the boat and devastating it for him. And even if we couldn't utilize those, if we all knew that broccoli is $16 a box, and if it's below that, somebody's losing money, we go back to that four-win deal of where's the suffering in this supply chain? Because there has to be suffering at that point. You can't just sit there and go, I got a damn good deal on broccoli at $6, because you've also created this high level of chaos.
Yeah.
Growers who have done it the right way and can't sell at that level, and growers who are coming into the marketplace and being convinced they needed to sell at that. And it's going to be 4 years on before they figure out their whole program is fucked. Yeah. Because of the fact they've never been getting the money that they needed.
Thanks for joining the Todd-versation. And now, a word from our sponsor. Splendid by Porvenir has long been recognized in the fruit and vegetable industry for its quality, volume, availability, and timely distribution. Did we mention that we have the best mangoes on the planet? Our decades of experience in providing a wide range of superior products throughout the year gives our customers and retailers alike confidence in Splendid products to deliver excellence 100% of the time. When only the best should be on your table, trust Splendid's commitment to exceeding your expectations. We are the best because we do it right.
Yeah, well, look, the declining market part of this, to your point about, what is the true cost of food and everything we've kind of touched about, it's terrible to see a farmer just walk around perfectly good food because he can't afford to harvest. He can't afford to pay to put that food on people's table. That's scary, right? It goes back to what we talked about early on. It's like understanding the true cost of food, for them to start to appreciate. And again, I think it's part of what we've done in this country when it comes to food. It's incredibly simple in a lot of ways. And to your point, David, we're not being told necessarily everything that there is. We don't put a lot of energy into it. I mean, I think if you think about back to what we've gone through with the pandemic when there wasn't toilet paper and just literally the panic that's stricken this country that we weren't going to be able to have toilet paper, it really for me was a turning point of really understanding, like, people just don't, they're worried about not having toilet paper. They're not even figuring out, well, I wonder what else I could do. Right. I mean, what did we do before toilet paper, kids? Right. And I think your points, you make a really, really good point. And I think we've got to start to embrace our food as a whole. And I think that the whole system, the four pillars of the system, if they're not working together in conjunction for the narrative to come out that's going to help everybody uplift each other, I think we continue to have the problems we have with our health. I think we continue to have the climate problems. I think we continue to lose more generations of farmers. Consolidation becomes more. Food's going to go up in cost and get worse, in my opinion, because it's going to be consolidated down to a few folks. It's going to be a whole different rodeo for the next generation. And I hope that these young kids that are on their phones 24/7 or chit-chatting or whatever they do with each other and tackling some of this stuff, because these are big problems that we need to face, and we can't keep ignoring them, because ignoring them is not working.
That's right. And you talked about climate change. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change just released a new report, and things are not looking so bright. we're seeing here at OGC a situation where, the disruption is the new normal in terms of growers. We have California flooding multiple times a year, and just really it's been challenging. And so we're telling ourselves, part of who we are is that we're nimble, thanks to David and those that kind of created this organization. So
yeah,
really
nimble does not rhyme with Dave. Dave does not rhyme with nimble.
He is nimble. He is nimble AF, as they say. But they that's what they kind of set up for us. So we're really thinking about that. And we're seeing growers already move where they're growing their product. We saw carrot growers moving north. I mean, we're hearing about it everywhere. And so it's just how we have to figure it out. And man, I don't know. I kind of doubt we're going to stay below 2 degrees of warming. It looks like 1.5 is pretty unlikely at this point. So that we're all going to have to get adaptive and nimble and figure out how to deal with that. But for the organic produce trade, as David said, it's pure supply and demand. It's going to be really interesting. And so how do we help our growers figure out how to adapt, and how do we help support them in the seeds and breeds work they're doing, and all of that? The big question that we're grappling with.
100%. And look, the Mother Nature's doing what Mother Nature wants to do, right? She's going to do whatever she decides to do this planet, no matter what we choose to do. Now, we can help it along. We could slow it. We could be a better steward of the time that we have on this rock, or we can just continue to not be good stewards. So yeah, the climate is a very interesting conversation. There's no two ways about it. There's not at all. I want to switch gears before we run out of time here, because I got to talk about this trust deal. If we can, and I don't know how you guys want to do it, but I mean, I do want to talk about what all this trust stuff is about. So somebody, one of the two of you, whoever wants this, please explain to me what the Sustainable Food and Agriculture Perpetual Purpose Trust is. Say that fast 5 times. You could, if you got pulled over by a cop and you had to say that one time, you'd probably get arrested.
When we were trying to come up with a name for this thing, I was trying to make it simple, man. Like, something people can remember. And when they brought that into the room, I was just like, are you kidding me?
Yeah, even the acronym is hard to say. SFAPPC.
Yeah, it sounds like you're cussing at me. Stop it.
David serves on the Trust Protector Committee. So maybe, David, if you'd be willing to take that.
Do you have a belt like Batman as a protector? What do you do? Throw a ninja star? What do you do?
I wish we had that. Well, I'll cover a little of it as background, but let Brenna, who's obviously, at this point, much more engaged in it than I am. We basically got here because we were not happy with certain dynamics of our previous structure that we thought were threatening to our long-term viability, which I won't get into here because it takes too long to get into. But we basically were like, we got to get into a place where our independence is preserved. And that was the biggest thing to us by far, was, we had been independent our entire life. We didn't answer to anybody. We could behave as a change agent in terms of the trade and society. And as I put it, we could live dangerously in the face of conventional wisdom, basically, without anybody telling us that doesn't make sense or you have to stop taking those risks. And so it was quite a journey in terms of investigating how we could go about doing this and how we make the transfer. Natalie Reitman-White, who was on our staff for a long time and a serious rock star in terms of her abilities, and especially in organization. She came on when we took on our sustainability mission statement back in 2005 and helped put together the Sustainable Food Trade Leadership Association, and then served on our staff. And then she did most of the work to put this trust, or a lot of the work to put this trust together. It was definitely a team deal. And so the role I specifically play is within the governance structure of it. There is we have, Brenna's leading the mission team within the business, supervised by a board. The board is appointed by the Trust Protector Committee. And then there's a Trust Enforcer Committee, which basically acts like a referee in the ring if the boxers can't agree to.
You guys got fucking handshakes or something? How many levels of security does this trust have?
We make the Masons look like Disney employees, dude. We got all that shit. Not only that, this is what's cool. The Trust Protector Committee is 5 people that are elected by 5 groups of shareholders. Our accounts, our growers, our stakeholders, our employees. Yeah, they don't have shares.
Yeah.
So it's our accounts, our growers, our employees, our communities, and our investors. Those people meet once a year and carry out elections for the Trust Protector Committee. 5 people sit on it. I'm one of them currently. And those people legally own OGC. I own OGC. I'm one of 5 owners. I can't do anything with it at all, but I own it.
Oh, congratulations on nothing. I'm not quite sure. I'm not sure what to say there.
I'm pretty nothing. Yeah. So take it away, Brenna. What do you?
Yeah. Talk us a little bit about,
Yeah.
what it meant, Brenna, and a little bit about what you hope to accomplish with it. I think would be really cool.
Sure. Well, in a normal company, right, you would have folks that held stock that would then be represented by the board by a corporate board to carry out their wishes. And the corporate boards are mandated to essentially return shareholder value for their shareholders, which means to help them build wealth. There's no requirement for them to do good. There's no requirement to, make sure they don't pollute the environment or to deal with climate change or to support growers. It's just profit. And so it was very visionary when, OGC decided to be the first purpose-owned trust in the world. I mean, sorry, in the country. I'm exaggerating. In the country, it's already been in place in Europe, and basically we exist to serve principles that are out there, like dealing with climate change, like supporting sustainable and organic ag, and because we are beholden to those purposes, we can do better as a company. We don't just have to return shareholder value and create, a horrible situation in the environment or socially. We are able to invest in our coworkers. We're able to invest in our stakeholders. We're able to invest in the business. And last year, we gave more than 62 organizations grants to support their work. So it really did a lot of work on coworker pay and a lot of work on coworker benefits, all kinds of things. So it's really been very positive for us. And recently, Patagonia followed suit and became a purpose-owned trust company. And we're creating a movement. There's a lot of interest in what we're doing because just delivering on shareholder value is not enough in today's environment, and there's a lot of pressure on companies to do better. So that's my take on it, David. What did I forget?
Well, I got to come alongside and say I absolutely love what you just said, because think about that when you talk about, and I want to talk a little bit about purpose over profits into perpetuity as well, but I'll jump on the bandwagon and take a look at the pharmaceutical companies. Are they really out for the better good? Some may say they are, some may say they're not, right? Profitability certainly shows. We certainly went through that experience, right? A lot of companies are out there doing stuff that profit is all that matters. It doesn't, the rest of it doesn't come into play, which is dangerous. And I love the fact that you guys take this approach of like, let's look at all the things that we're about, and every dollar matters and how we deal with it. And I think it's powerful. So Dave, if you want to come alongside, I don't know what the hell I'm talking about, but come along with anything you want. But I do want to touch on this purpose over profit thing. Whoever wants it, Brenna, if you want to grab it or whoever.
Yeah, I mean, David, when you were sitting in the room and this model was discussed, I know Natalie brought it to you. What was your gut reaction?
I was pretty happy about it. It was interesting. I mean, you're once again hacking into the wilderness as pioneers, and moving into the wilderness no one else is. And obviously, we had some people holding our hands, Ron and other people that we couldn't have done anything without. But the basic idea of getting out of the marketplace was definitely what we wanted to do. I dealt for years with people calling and wanting to buy OGC. We dealt with people attempting to put OGC out of business. Various threats came from the front. The existential threats basically came at us, and to find that there was actually a place that we could go where we'd be sheltered and be able to concentrate on the work we wanted to do rather than the issues we were dealing with before, which were, very, very significantly were what was shareholder value. That was the biggest thing that got talked at every annual meeting, is what are our shares worth at this point? And how are we going to generate the money to buy people out who've been in this business for this long? And who's got what coming? Because the rules of ag marketing co-ops, for instance, when we broke up, we hadn't done in-game. We had not thought it through. And when it came down the pike, it turned out that in-game was whoever sold 10% of the product got 10% of the value of the business, which was insane. It didn't work out fairly for hardly anybody involved. And so getting out of that capitalistic model and the threats that you carry when you're on that river was awesome, you know. And I've been very happy with our annual meetings. We obviously got knocked virtual by Corona, but a fair amount of people show up. They show up from all 5 of those communities. We're meeting this afternoon to review our last meeting that we had last fall. A lot of feedback from the shareholder groups in terms of how we can put on better meetings, give them better information, do better work. And it's incredible that, you know, one of the things we're able to do is, while we may not take home the profits, that, like we competed for years against basically entrepreneurial produce companies. Almost all of them in the Northwest are family owned and operated. So they're using their money to buy orchards, cars, various things. We use ours to invest in our communities. And so while that may not come back as profit, when it allows a farm to get a tractor or a cooler and farm better, or one of the things we did, I think 2 years ago, we bought one of our smaller accounts a produce rack. Well, we make them a better customer.
Yeah.
So that money may not go into my pockets and I may not take it out, but it ensures that the community that we need to do business with is in good shape.
100%. No, I love that. As CEO, right, has it, coming into this, right, has it changed your perspective on things? Because this is new to you. I mean, you haven't been, you haven't led one of these. Have you been a part of one of these before, have you?
No, I haven't. I mean, there's only two in the country.
Right.
So I think maybe, well, there's more. I think there's a few others that we've helped come along. But has it changed my perspective? I've always been a little revolutionary, Todd, and that's kind of an understatement. And so for me, the opportunity to work with this business model and to help refine it and help advance it was a pretty amazing opportunity. And what I've found is that, in terms of governance, there's more layers to it, as you kind of alluded to. You're like, wow, do you have your Superman belt? There's more layers to it than you would have with just one typical board that you're reporting with.
Right.
But I will say that those layers keep us on track in many ways and keep us on target. And they also protect the company from some kind of crazy scenario that could happen. But we know that it can't be bought or sold, and it's protected. So that it's serving these purposes. So I've really been enjoying the process, and it's been, we've worked through a lot together, and things are going well. And, I would just say it's an honor to be able to work on something like this that really could change the face of business in the United States.
Yeah, it certainly can. It certainly can. Anything else you want to throw about the trust that I didn't get to? I mean, I think we nailed it. I think it's really incredible to watch the transformation of this company from what I can remember back in the days when, we just used to sell smoke signals up to talk because we didn't have telephones. It was so long ago. But, to see where this company's gone from being, what it was to an ESOP, to developing now into the trust and for the greater good. I mean, it truly is it's a neat role model that businesses need to look at because it's making a tremendous difference, right? In wearing that on your shirt sleeve too, right? You're right out in front of it. You can't hide the profit and stuff like other companies can, where the money goes and what they do and how they spend it. It's pretty neat. It's pretty cool.
I think it's pretty essential at this point because, if I look at the journey we've been on for the last 40 plus years, we hit the wave of organic pretty much at a really good point. There were people ready to move into the marketing of organic and a distribution system, a national distribution system, and took advantage of the opportunity that was in front of us.
Yeah.
And when we first started looking at sustainability back in 2005, we found a lot of other companies were almost the exact same point we were. We had stabilized bootstrap businesses. We had dealt with certification and knew how the system was going to run. And whether it was us or VV or other businesses we were talking to, a lot of people were going, what's next? And the first word that was coming up on most, whiteboards was sustainability.
Right.
And I think the ownership one is now in the very same place. We went from, when I came into organic, I was in my late 20s. Almost everybody I was dealing with was in their late 20s, early 30s. All the people who put together OGC, almost, not completely, but most, were that age. When I was at the top of my career in terms of status or income or whatever, we had become a 2-generation trade. We're now a 3-generation trade. We have people my age at 70 who I mentored people who are in their 40s, and they're mentoring people in their 20s. And so you have a lot of legacy businesses that are looking down in terms of what happens next. Do I sell this business to my staff? Do I go out of business? Do I sell it to a competitor who's just going to wash it inside of their system and it's not going to matter anymore? But this is a highly, highly relevant topic to our entire trade at this point in terms of who is going to own the inventory that we have created over the last 4 decades.
Yeah. What's next for you guys? What's as we wind our time down? What's next for OGC? Anything exciting? I mean,
well, it won't be boring. That's for sure.
That's no shit. You people are never boring. That has never been a concern of mine. When I think of OGC, the word boring does not come into my vocabulary.
That's what David Bowie said. I don't know what I'll be doing next, but it won't be boring.
100% agree. No, anything exciting on the horizon for the rest of the year? Just keep grinding, hoping the economy turns.
Yeah,
People,
we are.
Get into it.
We're looking at right now, looking through a lot of different lenses. We're recovering after COVID. Everybody kind of with COVID and the ramp up of, spending from shoppers, that grocery saw and that produce saw. A lot of our strategic initiatives kind of were put to the side as we tried to respond to this incredible demand, just like everybody in the industry or in the trade. So we're focused on that, doing some of those strategic initiatives. We're looking to expand our Ladybug brand and really thinking about that. We're doing a lot of thinking about innovation and how do we innovate and what new product lines that we could bring on. We're thinking a lot about packaging. We're thinking a lot about climate change, like we've talked about, and how do we help our growers adapt to changing weather patterns. And then, a big chunk of work is around how do we really make OGC continue to be an incredible place to work and put our coworkers first and our stakeholders first. So a lot on the horizon, and I'm really excited about some of this innovation that is happening, but can't quite talk about some of it yet.
Dave, I was asking you what's next, but I'm assuming you're going to go watch Price is Right this afternoon. That's what I'm guessing.
I'm interested on 2 fronts. On the OGC front, what I'm really excited about is that we've put buying and sourcing and sales back into one system rather than separate departments, which I found somewhat aggravating in terms of getting alignment. And I think we're going to be doing some really interesting things in terms of the stuff I talked about earlier, like starting, literally going, seed to table, basically. And what roles does a distributor potentially have in terms of guiding the development of product lines and superior foods that allow us to deal with the issues we got to deal with. And then on a national level, I'm in my 7th year on the Organic Trade Association board, and there's a couple of projects. There's 2 or 3 I'm very interested in. One is getting up the Produce Council, which you sit on as well, and really getting that to be a more dynamic place for debate and deliberation. I'm also beginning to push on this idea of creating truly a emeritus corps and really trying to draft in a lot of the people my age and older and younger that are retiring from the trade and still have a lot to offer, whether it's attending conferences and speaking, or it's sitting on boards, or just mentoring, as senior leadership. And then the third thing is that we're really trying to get up and going a state advocacy network. Oregon, California, Wisconsin, Georgia, a couple other states, Pennsylvania are in the front on this, and we've met some. But our goal is to get to a point where organizations within the states are coordinating their activities and sharing best practices in terms of how they interact with their universities, how they interact with their executive branches and governors in their states, and really critically with their legislatures in terms of supporting organic and showing each other, this is how we did in Oregon, this is what kind of bill we got through in Georgia, whatever that may be, and doing that at that level. So
I love it.
Yeah.
And for being a retired guy, you're keeping busy.
Well, he's still working part-time.
Don't stop. It's
He
me.
is.
It's not going to work. Stop. You're not going to convince me.
It's
I know.
real. We need his mind on this.
His big brain is worth keeping around. His big brain's worth
really
having in the conversation. There's no two ways about it.
Yeah.
Thank you both for being here and hanging out today. This was fun. We got to talk for another 2 hours, most likely. We could have, figured it out. But nonetheless, I think it was a great conversation. I appreciate both of you hanging out with me.
Thank you. And you got to tell me what variety of tomato that is. I mean, it looks like they're about 3 feet wide and
this is
200 pounds each.
I put this up in honor of the tomato war, which is still a worthy event to continue talking about, and which we can do another time. Maybe we'll do some video footage of tomato war. I've had the good fortune of being there. But yeah, I have no idea what these varieties are behind me. I just, I just showed up and they were here.
All right. Well, great to see you. Great talking.
Thank you. I appreciate you guys very much for being here. Everybody, thanks for listening. Thanks for being a part of this conversation. We really do appreciate you for being here. Remember, like I say all the time, go inspire somebody. It's incredibly important. Just a simple hello can make somebody's day so much more better because you don't know what path they're on in life, and maybe you can make it be a little better for them. So please go out and reach out to somebody, tell them you love them today, or just send a text, whatever it takes. Make somebody's day better. So thank you for being here. Don't forget to check us out on social media. Dave, do you know why I'm on social media? Anybody, either one of you know why I'm on social media? Because I could see unlimited pictures of puppies and kittens. And that is the only reason I go on social media now. Thanks, everybody, for being here. We appreciate it. Much love to both of you. Thank you very much. And we'll chat soon. Take care, everybody. See you. Bye.